The compact sizes of Tomahawks are one of the more popular sizes in the market, and there are a lot of practical reasons for it. One, they're easier to store. The other one happens to be for carryability purposes, maneuverability, and ultimately versatility. I'm going to be reviewing compact Tomahawks today from my personal collection. They are the more purpose-driven Tomahawk compared to the more full-size Tomahawks, only because the handle is shorter, and since it is shorter, you won't have as much leverage as it relates to utilitarian tasks. The first compact Tomahawk that we're going to review here is actually a very well made and robust Tomahawk called the Cold Steel Recon Hawk. It's also called the Demko Hawk, which is designed by the amazing Andrew Demko. This is actually my first compact Tomahawk, and I must say that when I first moved with it, I thought it was relatively well balanced and it worked really well, so much so that it was a part of my early Tomahawk videos from last year. And I will say that it handles really well, and it's something that I really enjoy training with and moving with. But as time progressed, especially with more reps coming in, I started to notice that the point of the Tomahawk, despite the fact that I'm pretty familiar with weapons, this started to concern me quite a bit. There were a couple of reasons for it. One, because of the weight of the Tomahawk, if I go ahead and allow that weight to carry me in some way, I've shown it in several videos before, it has the tendency to touch an aspect of my anatomy, and in my opinion, that's a no-go. I think it would have been okay if it was balanced differently, so that if I hold it in a neutral grip, it doesn't lead me to hold it this way, because the majority of the mass and weight distribution is towards the head of the Tomahawk. But because the majority of it is in that direction, even with the slightest bit of momentum, my concern is that this Tomahawk is actually going to do damage to my anatomy. Although this Tomahawk, from a practical standpoint, is so robustly designed that I think it can do a lot of jobs that most compact Tomahawks could not, I think that this safety issue is going to be a bit of concern and a bit of word of warning to the consumer. It's very well made. I think it's well balanced. However, because of this extended pike here, I'm going to say buyer beware when you practice with the Tomahawk. The next Tomahawk we're going to look at is the Wingard Stingray. I did a recent review of this. It's balanced a little bit more towards the war pike, so that when I do angle 1, angle 2 movements, these types of movements that come from Filipino martial arts, because of this sharpened edge on this side, not only can I do your standard movements that come from FMA, I can borrow from Bowie combatives, where I can use this part as part of a back cut, then return with the war pike. So from a martial perspective, I think this is a very good choice. From a movement perspective, because of its size and its design, with the war pike in front of me, I can do these kinds of movements where I can actually hide the Tomahawk and then come up this way. So it starts to allow me to explore some tactics that I cannot really do with other compact Tomahawks for obvious reasons, because if I was to do something similar to that with the Demko Hawk, it's very obvious what it can do to me, so it's not a very good option. However, I think that this Tomahawk is designed in such a way where you can do movements like this, where you can hide it and come up, or you can do movements like this and then throw it. This is also a thrower. Since it is not a double duty tool, you have to be very precise in your use of it. You're going to be very respectful of its use, and you're going to be very precise in terms of your practice. We're going to take a close look at the Tona Alpha knife Tomahawk. This is the Multo compact Tomahawk. It allows for ergonomic multi-sectional gripping, but with a compact you don't necessarily have 3 of them, because with a full size you have the long range, mid range, and then pistol grip close quarter. But with a compact you really only have 2. It does, however, give you this enough puño so that if you need to hand and half it, you can do these kinds of movements. But for the most part, the compact Tomahawk, especially with this type of ergonomic design, allows for the kind of multi-sectional gripping where if I need to change my grip with a single hand, I can go ahead and do that with the appropriate tactile and ergonomic feedback and support. I'm pretty sure that it can do a lot of breaching capabilities, but I would say for a compact tomahawk like this, if you're going to go ahead and purchase it, I would say relegate it to your martial movement practice. And one of the things that I would absolutely recommend this for is a primary and secondary weapons use. Train with a compact Multo Tomahawk. I think it pairs really well with a dagger. In this case, this is the RMJ Raider dagger, and what it does is that you can do some form of espada y daga with it, or another form wherein this can work as the stripping tool and this is the primary tool, and it handles really well in that regard. The other thing I really like about this is that it actually is more designed for this medium range fighting. So if you're going to explore that aspect of tomahawk fighting, I would absolutely recommend this. And in my opinion, although Tirona has a Cabala Serrata background and Damon Lusky has a De Cueras background, I would say that this is relatively agnostic as it relates to style. There is an educative opportunity here in that I'm of the mind that their backgrounds inform the design of this compact, as mentioned in one of my previous videos, meaning these types of movements that allow the hand, the center line, to be the pivot point, that you can crash the center line, pivot across, post, and then do the karambit grip. I think it's worthy of your research to look into those styles to see how you can end up maximizing the use of this particular compact tomahawk. Because I would say that compact tomahawks specifically, because they're a little more purpose driven as it relates to tactical and martial use, I would say that if you go ahead and get one, take a look at the background of the maker, because what's going to inform their design is going to have a lot to do with the martial systems that they were trained in. And the Multo compact tomahawk is absolutely no exception to this. The next tomahawk we're going to take a look at is the RMJ S13 Shrike. So this is the compact version of the RMJ full-size Shrike, and I will say that other than the fact that the handle design is a touch shorter compared to the full size, I'd say about a good 3, maybe even 4 inches, it is basically the same tomahawk. You can expect the same kind of performance and the same kind of maneuverability. I would say that this S13 Shrike feels so light in the hand that in many ways it feels like there's nothing there, especially when I'm doing these kinds of abanico clock movements where it does feel really good in the hand, but once it hits a certain angle, it really starts to load my hand so that I can fire from it. Although there is a war pike on this side here, because it's designed in a certain way in terms of the arc of it, but also the length, if I go ahead and hold it in this position, it doesn't want to move in this fashion in the exact same way, simply because the balance is very different. It's not as head heavy as the Demko Hawk. So even if I go ahead and do this kind of movement, because of the angle but also the length of the war pike, I don't really have much of a chance to harm myself. So this one comes highly recommended from me from a safety standpoint, but also from a maneuverability standpoint. This is the most system agnostic as it relates to what kind of style you ought to know prior to the use of this tomahawk. Mind you, because of the sharpened beard of the S13 Shrike, when you start to use it, all you really need is some really basic mechanics as it relates to X patterning, and you're going to be in very good hands from a practical personal combat perspective. Whether you're holding it with the beard in front or with the pike in front, you're going to be able to do a lot of damage with this tomahawk from a personal combat standpoint. From a practice standpoint, even though my hand can actually go here and not risk having my hand get cut by that beard, I will say be mindful of it. I don't include it as part of my practice. I think a big part of the design is to encourage you to hold it primarily along the handle. There is a glass breaker on this side, so from that type of breaching capability, this tomahawk is superb. It is pointed and it's sharp, so just be mindful that if you're going to be doing any sort of anatomical indexing where you use your anatomy to change grip so that you can change your distances, that's not a technique that's available with the S13 Shrike. It encourages a lot of these basic X and Cinqueteros patterns, and it moves really well in it, so that from a personal combat standpoint it's very effective. But because of the balance, I will say this is something that you're really going to enjoy moving with and just putting in those thousands and thousands of reps and not necessarily risk any orthopedic chronic use injuries. Of all the tomahawks that I own, this is the lightest and possibly the most well-balanced one. since it is systems agnostic, it wasn't necessarily designed with a particular martial artist feedback. It was designed with a lot of feedback from military personnel whose practical field use was the data sampling size. As a result of it, what you have is a kind of tomahawk that moves really well from a practical standpoint with a lot of practical data and feedback supporting its design. The last one that we're going to cover today is going to be the Sayoc-Winkler compact tomahawk. I think this is the one compact tomahawk that is not only the most purpose driven, but it is also the most system specific, meaning this was designed by Tuhon Rafael Kayanan as it relates to the Sayoc Tactical Group training Navy SEAL Team 6. When he designed this in partnership with Master Smith Daniel Winkler, he was thinking very specifically about the type of missions and the type of scenarios that Navy SEAL Team 6 runs into, but also very specific to the delivery system of Sayoc Kali. The S13 Shrike has a straight handle, and the Sayoc-Winkler R&D compact tomahawk has all of these curves and these very distinctive ergonomic indices so that it's going to give you an idea in terms of neural feedback, in terms of its use whenever you grip it in a particular way along the handle. This one I happen to like because the handle is a little bit more like a Filipino martial arts stick. So technically, once you handle it and you're familiar with a stick or even a baseball bat or a hammer, it kind of tells you how to move with it without overcomplicating the movements. And again, this is a very combat-driven, purpose-driven tomahawk. So yes, you can actually use this for some very basic movements, but you're not really going to tap into its full capabilities as it relates to multi-sectional gripping, fine work. So if you're going to purchase something like this, make sure that you are in touch with an instructor so that not only do you understand how to use this in a safe manner, so that you can understand every inch of the tomahawk and the purpose of its design. A few more words on this. I would say that if you're looking at a compact tomahawk, be mindful that it is very purpose driven, that it's going to be leaning a little bit more towards the combat application and the martial practice. So that said, of all the tomahawks that you can get, by the time you get a compact tomahawk, that means you're going to practice with it within that martial context. So before you make that purchase, make sure that you're connected to an instructor or to a group that actually tells you, hey, this is how you can use it, and have a schedule for yourself in terms of how you're going to train and how you're going to practice. That way you can get the full use of the tomahawk during the lifespan of your ownership of that specific tomahawk. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Stick around, stay tuned, more videos to come.